Chapter 8 Astrology and Magic. Astrology has been described as the science of the stars by some, and as superstitious bunkum by others. What is the truth about astrology? Does it really work? Do the planets really rule our lives, or is it, as the critics imply, simply superstition? Those who oppose astrology do so out of fear or ignorance. They refuse to look intelligently. They quote many instances of how astrology has failed, or they give evidence of supposed scientific fact that conclusively proves that astrology really does not work. My answer to the critics is simply this. When you have studied the subject with an open mind, then and only then are you in a position to criticize. Those who believe avidly, I would also say, question those beliefs before you accept them as facts. Then and only then will you also know the truth of the matter. Astrology does work because it is a science, but like any science, it must be approached and used in the light of reason and common sense. Let us look now at astrology and how it works, why it works, and what it can do in today's world of magic. Astrology uses a combination of symbology and mathematics. Often these are confused, or one is given precedence or the other. The sum total of this is embodied in the birth chart, which is a symbolic map of the heavens at a given point in time. So what use could this possibly be? Well, given that at any point in time there will exist a unique pattern of energies, and because the influence of these energies will have an overall consciousness attached to them, then every point in time means something. As the Chinese say, all is change. So it is. Nothing stays the same from one second to the next. There is constant fluctuation and consequent reaction to this. At every point in time, no matter where this may be, something begins to exist and continues thereafter to have an effect in this world. Perhaps this is best illustrated by a simple example. If I had lived on this planet during Roman times, everything that I did then would have some effect on the present. This may sound silly, but had I disturbed a grain of sand in a different way on some far distant shore, this would have changed the course of history. Perhaps not significantly, but nevertheless the future would have been altered. On a larger scale, if I had spared the life of an adversary instead of killing him or her, things might have been completely different. This is hypothetical, but it does illustrate that any point in time is significant, because our actions shape the future. The cycle of events must then proceed from any point in time. In our lives, we look at the obvious point of importance, the time of birth. First, we must establish this accurately because, as stated, nothing stays the same for even a second. This is one reason why astrology can so easily be wrong, not because of the astrologer, but because the birth times are simply guessed or estimated. Accuracy is essential. I should mention that there are techniques that allow for unknown and approximate birth times to be rectified, and providing the astrologer knows that the time is approximate, these techniques can be used. The birth chart, therefore, becomes a symbolic representation of an important point in time that is directly related to a human being. It embodies the types of cosmic energies flowing at that time and gives indications of the consciousness that exists within these tides, a consciousness that will play an important part in the life of the person born at this moment. Here we are dealing with the beginning of a creative cycle embodied in the life of a human being. What began at this point in time will now have an effect on the future. Let us now look at the composition of a birth chart. By calculation, we arrive at the positions of the planets at a given time. In addition, allowances are made for location, alteration to clock time, curvature of the earth, and so on, until we have a symbolic picture of the heavens and how they relate to a place on earth at a point in time. The birth chart is divided into three main areas: the zodiac, the planets, and the houses. First, the zodiac. Do remember that this has nothing whatsoever to do with the constellations. The constellations are names given to groups of stars, whereas the zodiac is purely symbolic. The constellations are of unequal length, and while they may be important in astronomy, they are of no use to astrologers. The zodiac is a symbolic division of the heavens into 12 equal parts, or signs as they are known. Each is given a name, such as Aries, Taurus, Gemini, and so on. These become modes of action through which the planets act. For instance, the Aryan mode would be one of assertiveness, directness, enterprise, while the Libran mode would equate to harmony, justice, and balance. It is interesting to note how the zodiac is divided into groups of 3 and 4. The threefold division brings together signs belonging to the same element. For instance, there are 3 air signs: Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. Likewise, the other 3 elements of fire, water, and earth are similarly represented. There is also the grouping together of signs under the fourfold division known as quadruplicities. These are cardinal, fixed, and mutable. Any one sign will belong to an element and a quadruplicity. For instance, Cancer belongs to water and is cardinal, while Virgo belongs to earth and is mutable. These additional groupings help with interpretation and in the understanding of the nature of the sign. See Table 1 for the division of the signs into their triplicity and quadruplicity groups. A sign by itself has no power. This properly belongs to the planets. The signs are modes of action, ways in which power is channeled. Perhaps the best way to look at this is to regard each sign as a symbolic window through which light may pass. The sign is the window, the planet is the light. Obviously, any one planet will have a different effect in each sign. Mars, the planet of energy and drive, will express itself assertively and strongly in a fire sign, such as Aries, but will have a more emotional overtones in a water sign, such as Cancer. The sign, therefore, modifies the energy of the planet and gives it a particular direction or channel along which to flow. The planets are symbolic indicators of power. They do not, in themselves, have the slightest effect on human life, regardless of whatever less informed people care to say. While it is necessary to calculate the exact position of the planets in the heavens in order to discover how energy is flowing, it is important not to take this too literally. A planet may well be found in, say, the sign of Capricorn, but it is not the planet that causes power to flow. It simply indicates how the energy is flowing by its position and type. In order to understand the whole, we often have to break it down into manageable units. So it is with cosmic energy. We divide this into specific categories under the headings of planets. Therefore, that particular power which is responsible for expansion, luck, opportunity, and wealth is symbolized by the planet Jupiter. Jupiter itself does not cause luck, but its position in the chart gives positive indications as to a person's wealth potential. Anyone with an open mind can prove this. For the position of Jupiter in your own birth chart, as this planet is the symbolic indicator of wealth, by studying the sign in which it lies, you will be able to see how wealth is or is not to manifest in your life. As an example, Jupiter in the earthly and possessive sign of Taurus will bring in wealth through practical and cautious ways of gradual acquisition. Jupiter in Sagittarius tends to bring in wealth through travel and higher education. Of course, there are other considerations, but nevertheless, this will be true in a general sense. The relationship between planet and sign is important, for one modifies the other. The relative positions of the planets to each other is also measured and considered. The angles between planets are known as aspects. Not all angles are important, and in astrology these are narrowed to a relative few. Each angle carries with it an interpretation, which has a direct bearing on the total effect of the planets. Briefly, there are 2 kinds of aspects, usually known as good and bad. I think that this terminology is not particularly accurate because it implies fate and tends to give the wrong impression, so I shall use the word difficult. A difficult aspect will, due to a variety of factors, incline an individual toward the wrong use of energy. A good aspect will tend to do the reverse. While this inclination cannot be denied, it must always be remembered that there is no compulsion in cosmic law. We always have free choice. If a planet has one or more difficult aspects, the likelihood of problems is high, but this can always be reversed by intelligent self-searching, by shedding of bad habits, and by the use of creative and positive thinking. The stars never compel, they merely incline. Going back to our example of Jupiter and wealth once more, The aspects to this planet will also indicate how wealth potential is likely to be affected and incidentally tell us how we may make better use of our potential, or rid ourselves of problems in this area. Suppose that Jupiter had a difficult aspect to Venus. Venus is in one respect the planet of money. Putting together the wealth potential of Jupiter with the ability to attract money is indicated by Venus. We could say that the individual with this aspect would be blessed with abundance. What the difficult aspect will bring in is some of the more negative possibilities, one of these being that of wastefulness or allowing money-making opportunities to slip through the person's fingers. The potential is there, but due to aspectation, this may well not be fully realized. The beautiful thing about the cosmos is that once the problem is realized, then the so-called difficult aspect begins to work beneficially. Difficult aspects simply mean that there is something to be learned. The final area of the birth chart is the all-important houses. Again, these are a symbolic division of life into 12 distinct areas. The houses equate to the direct effects on life. As an example, the first house rules or governs our personal expression and the way in which we project ourselves. I should add that so strong is the influence of the first house, it often takes precedence over a person's sun sign. The latter governs our inner drives, while the first house governs more outward expression. Likewise, the second house rules earnings and possessions, the third house our ability to think and communicate, and so on. Covering every aspect of life, the overall result is that we have a chart calculated around a fixed point in time, which is unique to an individual. It contains a message of potential, and the planets symbolize the energies we will use. The signs symbolize how we will use them, and the houses indicate how they impact into everyday life. Add this to the aspects between planets, and we have a mass of useful information, providing that it is interpreted the right way. Modern technology does have its place in astrology. Calculators and computers save endless hours of tedious calculation and remove the possibility of human error. What the computer cannot do is interpret the chart fully. Granted, there are some very clever programs that provide lots of stylized information. However, there is no substitute for understanding and intuition. Computers are not aware, nor do they have a sixth sense. They are machines. I am not saying that every astrologer should be a clairvoyant. Far from it. What I am saying is that the human mind can often make deductions that are not based on pure logic. The reason for this is that since a birth chart is symbolic, it is likely to act as any symbol will, bringing facts out of a person's subconscious mind which are likely to remain unnoticed otherwise. Symbolism is a powerful tool, and it is perfectly embodied in a correctly drawn birth chart. Looking at some of the less obvious uses of astrology, with particular reference to magical work, we see that the birth chart is the starting point for many important discoveries. The first step in producing an accurate chart is that of calculation. Here we may run into a problem. Have we got accurate birth data? In other words, date, place, and time, or not? In order to calculate an accurate chart, an astrologer must know that the birth data is correct, especially the time of birth. This is where most mistakes are made. So often the astrologer is presented with times of birth that are, to say the least, suspect. Far better to give the astrologer the facts. If you are absolutely certain of your time and birth, then say so. It is not sufficient to presume a time of birth. It has to be known exactly if you want accurate information. It is better not to give an exact time of birth if you're not certain. Say instead, I was led to believe that I was born between, say, 9 and 10 a.m. in the morning, or even late in the afternoon. This way, the astrologer will not make the mistake of presuming that the birth time is in fact true and accurate. Astrology is a science, and as such it uses scientific methods. Chart calculation relies on mathematics, which take into account the movement of the planets, the rotation of the earth, and how these relate to the place of birth. In short, the birth chart is a map of the heavens as viewed from the place of birth at the time of birth. If the time is wrong, then the map or view of the heavens is also wrong. Often a few minutes can make a profound difference to the chart. Having established the accuracy of birth data, we now have to calculate the chart. The procedure is quite simple. but does need some patience and practice. Often the task is made more difficult because of badly written books, which fail to explain the technique in a plain, common sense manner. The availability of calculators and computers has made this task far easier, but you do not have to calculate your chart. You can order it from a service company for a few dollars. For those of limited means who need to calculate the old way, I can recommend The Modern Textbook of Astrology by Margaret Hone. It is a little dated, but it is one of the best. There are many choices of chart type. I use only Equal House for the simple reason that it works when the others do not. Equal House has constantly proved its validity and, unlike Placidian charts, does give a much more usable visual picture. In any case, Placidian charts are of little value in the northern latitudes, and it is surprising that these are still used in textbooks. Having calculated a chart, we must now interpret this. There is only one valid technique, and that is to learn the nature of each planet, sign, and house, rather than to try to read these from a book. Only when these are learned and understood is the birth chart likely to reveal realistic information. Again, this takes time, but it is well worth the effort. The combination of planetary positions in sign and house, together with aspects, chart shaping, and other factors, give masses of information to the skilled astrologer. This information can be translated into useful advice as to potential problems that are likely to occur. It is also possible to project into the future by studying the changes caused by various factors, such as transits and progressions. Transits are perhaps the most useful guide because they use the actual movement of the planets in relationship to the birth chart, as opposed to the more symbolic system of progressions. Astrology has a great part to play in the future of humankind, especially when it is linked to medicine, psychology, and science. Being an integral part of the science of magic, astrology has much to offer the serious student. In fact, without some knowledge of basic astrology, magic tends to become an incoherent mass of superstition. Energy exists and can be classified, categorized, and codified by using astrological principles. In theory, you can make anything work up to a point, but it is far better to adopt a scientific approach that will reveal the truth and thereby give access to further use of power. Astrology offers such a system. It should be understood that it is not necessary for every would-be student to undertake a complete study of astrology. This is likely to be a wasted effort. What is necessary is a knowledge of the nature of the planets, signs, and houses in order to learn how energies apply themselves. A fair analogy would be the difference between a man who owns and drives a car as opposed to the man who can service it himself. Obviously, the latter is going to save time and money, understands his vehicle better, and probably sees faults developing before they become serious. So it is with magic. A working knowledge of astrology helps you understand yourself and your relationship to the vast potential available as cosmic energy. Esoteric astrology can help in many ways, especially from a practical point of view. By examining the birth chart, it is possible to discover which planet or combination of planets rules, and I use that word loosely, certain areas of your life. In short, if you wish to know which planet governs income, health, or career, this is quite easy to discover. These personal ruling planets are a boon because they show clearly which planet to use in any given situation. A common mistake is that of presuming that, for example, Jupiter rules wealth. The matter is a little more complex. Jupiter energy indeed rules wealth potential, but there are two approaches to be considered. First, we must consider the movement of this planet in the heavens and how and when it forms aspects to planets in the birth chart. At these special times, Jupiter energy is applying and therefore usable. However, much depends on which planet in the birth chart is being aspected as to the outcome. Jupiter is the planet of expansion. If we take a typical aspect of Jupiter to Mars in a person's birth chart, this will not necessarily produce wealth. Far from it. The first consideration is the nature of the planets forming the aspect. Jupiter equates to expansion and Mars to energy. The result? Lots of energy. It would therefore be nonsense to presume that Jupiter energy bestows wealth all by itself. Also of equal importance is the impact point or planet in the birth chart. This is where the personal ruling planets come into the picture. By knowing which planet rules wealth in your chart, your birth chart, and by knowing when planetary energies are applying to this, you are then in a unique position to use this power to your advantage, and likewise with all other personal ruling planets. The net result is to take magic out of the Dark Ages and bring it into the 20th century, at least. Science takes over from superstition, and there is then no need to use hit or miss principles, such as praying to non-existent gods. Use the planetary forces instead. Surely this makes sense. Now, if this sounds complicated to put into practice, let me assure you that it is not. Do remember that any ritual performed with dedication and confidence will work. However, if you know when a planetary aspect is actually being formed, these periods will most certainly lend weight to your efforts, because you will be in tune with what is actually happening as decreed by the cosmic tides. The only way to know when these tides are formed is to have someone prepare an Aspectarian showing when planetary transits are aspecting your natal planets. The alternative is to learn how to do this yourself. Any good book on astrology will help you with this. Let us look at a purely practical consideration. It is a well-known fact that when a problem occurs, it is usually too late to do anything about it. This is because the appropriate planetary energy has arrived, has been interpreted by the subconscious mind, and is now a physical fact. The best one can hope for is to attempt to clear up the mess. How much better it would be if we could see when problems are likely to occur before they happen. An Aspectarian gives you this information well in advance. Again, suppose you wish to improve your finances by magical means. The Aspectarian tells you exactly the best time to work. Aspectarians are particularly useful to those involved in Kabbalistic workings. Rather than adopt the normally accepted technique of working paths and spheres according to random choice, or the slightly better method of gradually working up and down the symbol of the tree of life, the Aspectarian indicates exactly when a sphere or path may be worked to its best effect. The net result is one of more contact, because the natural tides are being utilized in the best possible way. Natural planetary directions. Each planet has a natural affinity with an element and therefore has a natural magical direction within the magical circle. In dealing with cosmic energies of the planets as they exist in their own right, it is better to use the directions dictated by the planet's natural affinity. See Table 2. For example, should you wish to do a working involving the sun, you would use the principal element given, concentrating and using the prime magical direction of south. In brief, this would consist of opening the magic circle and allowing golden light to enter the temple, starting at magical south and continuing in a clockwise direction back to south. Here are some useful attributes you can work out yourself that relate to your personal magical directions. Each personal ruling planet has an affinity with one of the 4 elements. These can easily be worked out from your birth chart. Each zodiacal sign is ruled by one of the 4 elements. In this chapter, you will find certain lists that come under the heading of one of the 4 elements. In these lists, you will find all 10 planets in each of the 4 elements. Simply circle the appropriate planets which fall under the rulership of each element. If you do not wish to write in the book, then make this list on a separate sheet of paper. Discovering your personal magical direction. I will show you how to find your personal magical direction. We will use an example chart, see Figure 6, so you can see how this works. Starting with the first house, Aries, in the birth chart, you will study each house in turn until you have covered the whole chart from Aries all the way through the 12 signs to Pisces. So to begin, find Aries in our example chart and see if there are any planets in this sign or house. If there are any planets in fire, then they will all manifest through the south and the element of fire by virtue of the fact that Aries is a fire sign. This always dictates which direction you should work. In our example birth chart, Taurus has Mars in its house. Taurus is an earth sign, and by virtue of this, Mars would manifest through the north instead of the south. Looking at the example birth chart, find Cancer. In this house, there are 3 planets, the Moon, Jupiter, and Uranus. All of these planets would manifest through the west. Therefore, the magical direction to work would be west and the element of water. I hope you can see the pattern here. When you have worked through each house in the example chart, do your own. See figure 7 on page 148. Obviously, if you have ordered your chart calculations from an astrological service, you will know where the houses and planets are placed based on your time of birth. If you decide to enter them into the blank chart, figure 7, you'll get a different kind of energy from learning this way, and you will know the personal direction for each of your planets. Okay, this is Travis Mages here. I would highly recommend that you write down on your own this next part. Take notes. All right, it's going to be the 4 elements and information about them. So here we go. Air. Symbol, circle. Magical direction, east. Magical weapon, sword. Time of day, dawn. Time of year, spring. Zodiac signs, Libra, Aquarius, Gemini. Keyword, communication. Association, thinking. Kabbalistic world, Atziluth, the world of origination and creativity. Tarot cards, the suit of swords. Personal planets ruled by the sword. Circle appropriate planets from your birth chart. Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. Fire. Symbol, triangle. Magical direction, south. Magical weapon, rod or wand. Time of day, noon. Time of year, summer. Zodiac signs, Aries, Leo, Sagittarius. Keyword, direction. Association, being. Kabbalistic world, Bria, the world of creation and the emotions. Tarot cards, the suit of wands. Personal planets ruled by the rod. Circle appropriate planets from your birth chart. Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. Water. Symbol, crescent moon. Magical direction, west. Magical weapon, cup or horn. Time of day, dusk. Time of year, autumn. Zodiac signs, Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces. Keyword, receptivity. Association, feeling. Kabbalistic world, Yetzirah, the world of formation, mental activity, and the emotions. Tarot cards, the suit of cups. Personal planets ruled by the cup. Circle appropriate planets from your birth chart. Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. Earth. Symbol, square. Magical direction, north. Magical weapon, shield. Time of day, night. Time of year, winter. Zodiac signs, Capricorn, Taurus, Virgo. Keyword, actuality. Association, doing. Kabbalistic world, Asaya, the world of expression and physical fact. Tarot cards, the suit of pentacles. Personal planets ruled by the shield. Circle appropriate planets from your birth chart. Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. The personal planetary directions I have just shown you are very important because they are taken from your birth chart, which is nothing less than a map or plan of your inner potential and abilities. These directions are to be used when attuning the magical circle and inner temple in a personal sense, and for any magical workings involving you. It is suggested that before you make use of these in the manner described, you should take time to become fully conversant with them. Always remember that these correspondences are only suggestions. They are not hard and fast rules. Suppose that you were performing a ritual or doing magical work concerning yourself. You would open the magic circle and use the inner temple. However, the prime magical direction would be changed from the natural to the personal. For instance, if a person had Venus ruled by the element of fire and the magical rod, then the natural magical direction of north would be replaced by south. There are two important points to emerge. First, there is a natural linkage between a planet and its magical direction. For example, Venus, shield, magical north. This, of course, relates to the natural motive power. The magical shield is the control symbol for Venus, using a normal magical working. Second, each weapon and direction also has a secondary rulership, which is determined by the planetary positions in your birth chart, as I have shown you. Some further examples will serve to demonstrate how these are used. Let us suppose that your magical rod is given as ruling the planet Venus. This means that, from a personal point of view, Venus should be sought at the magical direction of south rather than at the traditional, normal direction of the north. Naturally, the magical rod will replace the shield as control symbol. Such a working would consist of a temple opening around the personal magical direction. In case of confusion, the rule is for general workings, use the normal magical direction together with its appropriate controlling symbol. For personal workings, use the personal magical direction with its appropriate control symbol.